numbers to quantify it at this moment, but some people really do like subscription VOD type content that's not ad supported. And so there is a kind of counter tendency going on, but you can't beat free. So there'll always be some ad supported content.
Yeah, I think ultimately we need to look at it more from the consumer's perspective, and the consumer is going to decide. Right now they have the option of having content without any kind of paid advertising support, and they're willing to pay for it, or if they're willing to pay for don't want to pay for it, but want the advertisers, and they're willing to get those messages. I think the key is going to be targetability and being able to hit the right people, so you don't annoy everybody else.
So the annoyance curve is going to be
Yeah.
the key threshold.
Yeah, I think for me, like advertising is ultimately going to be more data driven as well, and that sort of alludes to your point about targetability as well. When you look at free content, especially the rise of social network, etc., it was largely free, for the past few years, right? But I think a lot of marketers are seeing that as organic reach on some of the key social networks like Facebook has plummeted in the past year, paid advertising is going to be even more important, and there's huge anticipated growth there. So I think it's about marketers really understanding based on data how they're going to drive ROI.
I think the word advertising is really evolving. And advertising, I think brands will be part of all of these different mediums. And the significance is that in the different mediums, you have abilities to create different visuals, different formats, different messaging. And the brands are very much real. They're a part of life, which is what I always speak to and have spoken to with product placement back to 7-Up, where it's organic. So the advertising will be all through these cross platforms, organic, and with the new quantifications, it's going to blow up. It's going to be fabulous, I think.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. I mean, I think when we think of advertising in the traditional sense, I think that term is completely changing. What advertising means, especially to the younger millennial, generation, it means something completely different. You can't try and sell to them. It's not going to work. There needs to be that authenticity, I think, in order for it to be effective. So I think the definition of advertising will continue to transform as these younger users become younger buyers.
I also agree. I mean, a lot of the work that our agency is doing has more to do with blurring the line between what is advertising and what is content. It's more about how brands can help collaborate on content with recognizable people who already bring an audience in and of themselves. And in some ways, the people that they're collaborating with become the media channel.
Mm-hmm. So, you can hear right off the top that everyone here has a lot of experience. And what's great about this panel, and I'm hoping that the live stream, I'm going to circulate it at least, is I want to take a step back and introduce everybody and have them introduce each other respectively, but just saying your name and what your company is, but more importantly, like what your role is and what is your passion? What problem do you get to solve in the media space every day?
Well, I'm Jane Clark. I'm the managing director of the Coalition for Innovative Media Measurement, or CIM, as we call it for short, which is a group of 20 different buyers and sellers of media who have come together to try to solve, particularly for cross-platform measurement, meaning across media, across devices, across distribution platforms. And we represent all the major broadcast and cable networks, all the major media buying agency groups, and a handful of large advertisers.
Great. I'm Cheryl Harkins. I'm with TiVo Research and Analytics. We're a small division of TiVo. I actually started as a buyer planner at an agency in Chicago, little one, Leo Burnett, and moved to Nielsen for the last 17 years, and then just joined TRA boy, it's acronym heavy here. Joined TRA about a year ago. And what TRA does is they were the innovator of creating true single source, where we take loyalty card information or CRM databases, we match it with set-top box data, as well as digital exposure data to help all of our clients and their agencies to be able to target better, to actually target purchasers of the product or purchasers of your competitive product, as well as be able to carry that from the targeting portion all the way through the buying and planning system to the accountability or the metrics at the back end, whether it be sales lift or increases in awareness or anything like that.
I just want to jump in here and say that TiVo, as everyone knows, was really an interesting company that really disrupted TV advertising for a while. So now you're playing another role,
Mhm.
getting back into the game with all the data and the understanding. So we're looking forward to hearing some of the deep dark secrets that are not obvious to everyone else.
I'll swear everyone to
Okay.
silence.
Okay.
Hi, I'm Monica Lay. I work for Adobe as a senior product marketing manager for advertising solutions as part of the Adobe Digital Marketing Cloud. Also focus on social advertising, which is, a growing arena. But I guess one of my passions, I've been working in the industry for about 14 years now. A lot of it is in the digital ad agency space as well. And I think, why I've sort of moved from agency into more so programmatic in the last 5 years is because how transparent digital is today, and also the fact that it's a lot easier to prove ROI in digital because it's so measurable. But I guess it does come with its challenges as well, which I'm sure we'll address today.
Great.
I'm Marcia R. Levine. I have a product placement agency called A-List Entertainment that I founded in the early 90s. Did product placements such as Duracell and The Matrix, Dr. Pepper and Spider-Man, and love this woman here because she was with Nielsen, who gave us third-party quantification, because all the ad agencies used to say to us, oh yeah, poo-poo you, you can't quantify, you forget it. Then when TiVo started and everybody started skipping the ads, Madison Avenue went, oh my goodness, what are we going to do? We better get into product placement, or is it branded entertainment? What is it? Branded entertainment. So we have an evolution of not only the recognition of product placement, but the evolution of the understanding of how seamlessly to fit brands in the context of a production, because it's natural. And when it's natural, it's beautiful. And now we have engagement, which is even more beautiful. So I just love what's happening.
My name is Julian Gutierrez. I'm an engagement director with Huge. Huge is a full-service digital agency. We're about 1,000 people worldwide. I'm based here in the Los Angeles office, and I oversee the clients in our LA office. We kind of look at it from really every different angle in terms of representing our clients as well as representing our users. Oftentimes we find that our clients are both content creators as well as publishers. So with that comes very different challenges and very different opportunities. And those are the types of things that we're trying to solve. On the user side, you have the annoyance factor of the traditional ad in a digital medium. And definitely the need for, I think what both of you were talking about in terms of having that branded experience that makes sense and adds value and is kind of meant to be there, or feels like it's meant to be there. So we're looking at it from all of those perspectives.
And so who are some of the key clients that you work with? We work
with a lot of entertainment clients here in LA, of course. I've actually spent the last 18 months focused on entertainment. So we've been doing a lot of strategy design and development for TV everywhere type of experiences. We worked with HBO and did the strategy and design development for HBO Go several years ago. And yesterday we launched Simpsons World, which is super exciting, which is the Simpsons TV show, which is a cross-platform experience, kind of the digital evolution of The Simpsons, and brings all of the episodes to you fans on demand.
That's great.
We also work with a lot of automotive clients in the LA office, as a lot of people do in LA. And then we've pretty much every other sector covered, depending upon where the office is.
Okay, great.
And I'm Suzanne Hayter. I'm the Chief Digital Officer of Select New York. We are a global full-service agency as well. Although my title is digital, we normally work with brands that are in the stages of moving from sort of smaller cap marketing, firms that are $100 million in sales, trying to sort of make the jump to be more like in the $500 million in sales range. And there's a really crucial moment where you have to completely rethink about how you do marketing. A lot of them are in the stages of looking at partnering with outside investment firms to help them make that transition. So we often answer to multiple sort of packs of stakeholders as we're doing our work. Our engagements usually last a year or longer, but we've had a lot of our clients for over 10 years. So it's we get pretty neck deep in terms of business consulting in addition to doing marketing stuff. So I would say that when we do creative work, it's not so much about I have a pre-thought out marketing plan as it is I have this much money and I know that I need to be able to make this much impact in this amount of time. How do I spend it? So we're really freed from thinking about things in terms of just straight up numbers, and more free to test and learn in a lot of cases to be able to get these brands into the hyper targeted places they need to be able to turn their business around and build audience.
Suzanne, who are some of your customers?
Sure. We work a lot with fragrance and beauty brands, including Coty, including some Estee Lauder brands as well. We also work with St. John, Procter & Gamble, most notably Fekkai. We just did a relaunch for them in January. And St. John, Carrera, a lot of brands. And again, we are global, so many of them in Europe, and then we do the worldwide communications for them as well.
I almost want to ask who's in the audience because it's no, but I just want to ask how many are very actively involved in either content creation and or how about ad tech, or advertising and placement, and
I know which one I finished.
yeah, both.
I test advertising for film and television and content.
Okay, and what's that second row all about?
We're USC students.
Oh God. Okay, professor.
The future
Okay,
is here.
This is it. Okay,
In
so we're gonna have-
communications or business or which area?
Communications, advertising.
Okay. Great. All right, so this is a great education. This is honestly a great education. So I want to just start off and just say that amongst ourselves, let's have the dialogue a little bit about if advertising is changing, we're all going into cross-platform. What are some of the key challenges? And one of the first challenges is obviously creating the creative for those types of multi-dimensional connectivity experiences. So do the agency gals want to weigh in a little bit on what the challenge is when that customer comes in and says, here's my budget, and you're developing a strategy for them creatively. How much do you push into TV versus your instincts on online versus mobile? How do you do a 360 look at that for them?
As in divide where they should be.
Or just try to figure out what makes sense?
I think if I'll just
Yeah,
kick
go for
off. There are a lot of challenges, right? Because it's so complicated, it's so fragmented, and it changes every single minute of every single day. So you're kind of it's like a moving target in many ways. I think one of the first challenges we're presented with is what are we measuring and why? There are a lot of different types of KPIs that you can measure against. And there's a lot of debate around what is the right KPI? How do you actually know if you're really being successful? Are you looking at brand metrics? Are you looking at clicks? Are you looking at video views or total views? Or, there's so many different ways. And again, that even grows as days go by. So I think the first thing to do that we're trying to do is really collaborate with our clients and nail down really what that true metric needs to be. And it isn't always the obvious ones. We'll start with the obvious and we'll start to kind of peel the onion back to figure out what it is that they're trying to accomplish and, what KPIs are best to kind of match to those objectives. And they're always different.
Yeah, I think the big challenge for us is just that it's so we do some media planning in-house, the digital media planning, but it's been hard for us to work with traditional media planning partners just because our clients are being in fashion and beauty. So much of the way that plan comes together has to do with the quality of the media vehicle. And it's not just a numbers game. It's very much about who are we rubbing shoulders with when we're in this vehicle. What does it mean for us to be there? How long will the impression last? Not just will it count? And I think we often find that we have to educate the media planning people who are brought to the table as like, this is our buying vendor. We often have to sort of do a lot of onboarding for them to almost get them into the moment of thinking of media planning as a creative endeavor as much as a numbers endeavor.
Right.
So I mean, the data is super important because at the end of the day, that's how you get judged on success, especially when there are investors involved. But and again, fashion and beauty is a very distinct space, but then when you actually do the measurement afterwards, when you survey to find out, has this brand risen in terms of prestige, it has a tremendous impact. I can't overstate that. I mean, we've seen with good media partners who understand the value of sort of the branding aspect of it, twice as much lift as ones where we've just been told, like, fill out the sheet of what assets you have and we'll put them in the right places to get you the exposure. So it's that sensitivity is super critical, especially for brands that are in the middle of a turnaround.
Yeah.
Yep.
And
Marcia.
smaller brands too.
Yeah,
because they don't
exactly.
have-
No,
They don't
that's
have huge budget.
You see, this is
Yeah.
what we were always speaking about when we started in the 90s, when there were just a few of us. We would say, okay, you have your quantification from Nielsen, which was at that time just advertising, and it didn't do product placement quantification. But what we're delivering is an engagement, is a relationship with the particular artist that is like a star endorsement. We would call it implied star endorsement, and is the correct terminology of what we use with today still, because we were in the essence of product placement, engaging in the storyline, engaging the brand essence. Like when I started with Dr. Pepper 7-Up in the 90s, they gave me a directive to change. They were changing the 7-Up demo from 40-something women to more kind of streetwise, kind of hip type of characterization. And they weren't that concerned with having the 20 million viewers at that time, is what a lot of top network shows got. They were more concerned with hitting the right target market. What did that mean? That meant the association with the character. And I think that addresses what you're saying. And that's where we've come today. So we have wonderful quantification. We have engagement as well, which is tremendous for brands and content makers. And we also have a metric that is vastly different to what it was before and changing still.
Right, but I think what's happened too is that as the consumers have moved across platforms, and then the content creators have wanted to invest in more content that goes across platforms, and they wanted to then bring along their agency and advertiser partners to help them to support and monetize that content as it goes across platforms. There haven't been planning tools, sort of audience exposure tools, and these effectiveness tools, KPI, brand impact measurement tools, that have now evolved to cover this cross-platform world. So people are still doing a lot of this planning and buying and evaluation in silos, as we call it. So, there's the digital silo, the television silo, there's print silo. Even sometimes the product placement gets into, a television silo or a digital silo. So that's the big challenge now for the future. It's pulling together these integrated kind of planning tools, because a marketer has a target audience. They want to reach that person in whatever ways, across whatever platforms, whenever they can, in the way that optimizes their communication. And that's their objective. It's not so focused on all the different media touch points.
I think the fact that you have multiple agencies that focus on one specific thing, as a consumer, I don't go, today I am going to go use my digital device to go and you just go with whatever you have at the moment. And I think a lot of times we lose sight, to Jane, to your point about silos. Advertisers have those silos, agencies have their silos, and I think the problem that we run into is accountability. Nobody wants to change the KPIs. You know, if they're going along and working really well, we've had an issue with brand managers just wanting to stick with the KPIs. Now, if I all of a sudden switch my target to a purchaser-based target and I do less, or, you know, on the downside, then I'm going to get dinged, you know, and be held accountable for that. So I think some of the change is going to have to start from above, and understanding that the management advertisers need to promote the idea of trying something new and something different, and to keep the consumer as the ultimate focus, and look at video, not at TV versus digital video. It's
So the
video.
platforms become agnostic in a sense, even though they're all going to be a collection of viewers, as I call it. And you know, the more interactive the medium becomes, is a term we coined a long time ago, because there is a level of engagement. The word engagement is a little bit overused in some ways. The issue is if you're watching versus if you're actually doing something. And you know, the engagement factor means how long are you actually, you know, going to retain this, and how often are you going to revisit it? And, you know, there's just a lot of really kind of basic things that don't change irrespective of the device that you're using. The content has to be fashioned for that.
And most people are not just doing one thing. I mean,
Right.
if we ask the second table,
Right.
you know, what's the one thing that you happen to have with you whenever you're watching television or you're out at a bar or whatever? You know, I have a 24-year-old daughter. She can do 3 things at a time. So, you know, I don't know that she retains any of them, but she certainly doesn't, you know that Charlie Brown wah, 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 that's what she hears from me. But, you know, she'll be listening to music while she's texting someone, while I'm trying to have a conversation. And she can respond to all 3. So it's amazing what a consumer can do. So concurrent usage of different devices is important to understand as well. And while they are doing 2 things together, it's not always that they are researching the program that they happen to be watching. They're checking their Facebook page. They're, you know,
It's very
reading
distracted
blogs.
viewing. Yeah, it's beautiful for everyone who has HD. But I think it is, you know, it's amazing because there's this raises a question of measurement, right? And so we're talking about if everybody is looking dynamically at the same time at different screens and doing different things on those screens, how do we start to gauge, even with the measurement systems that are out there to gauge the program that you're watching? There are a lot of other engagement factors that fragment that viewing. So I want to step back because Jane is actually with SIM, which we mentioned, and they are, you know, it's got a pivotal role in looking at cross-platform measurements. So can you take us to school on that a little bit and tell us what you're measuring, what's
Sure.
changing?
Sure. I mean, basically, SIM will work with any provider who can come up with a good solution. And so we get a lot of, you know, the SIM members are very smart people, sort of thought leaders who work together to put out an RFP for the industry. And here is what we need in terms of a cross-platform measurement solution. And then we'll work with Comscore, with Nielsen, with Adobe, with, you know, TRA, with Rentrack, with anyone who can come up with these solutions. And so the one we're working on currently is called Project Blueprint, and it's a 5-platform measurement of unduplicated reach across all the 5 platforms. And that's kind of a basic question before you can even get to a lot of these measures of effectiveness. And the KPIs kind of is, can you really get a measurement of the audience that you're reaching across the platforms? Is it 1 person on 5 platforms, or is it 5 people, each on a different platform? And that's pretty essential in terms of buying and selling media. So the project we're working on it's got television, radio, smartphones, tablets, computers, across video, audio, and sort of text-based, you know, flat interactive type web and app type content. And the key thing is that, you know, it's complex, and I'm happy to answer questions about it, but there's some basic principles to try to get at this deduplication. And one of them is that panel data, and I think, you know, TRA will also illustrate this as well, is that panel data is too small. So the Nielsen panel of having 20,000 households trying to tell us everything about cross-platform measurement, when you get into all these overlapping usage and user segments, you just run out of sample. And so the new solutions that people are looking at are more what's called hybrid measurement. where you're matching kind of census type data, like in digital, everybody tags all their content and all their ads and their videos and everything. And then it's matched to panel data that provides the demographics. So you get the volumetric measure from the census data, the big machine data, the return path data in television, and you get the demographic measure or the person-based measure, more from the panels. And there even are other sort of big data solutions to matching to get the demographics and the purchaser graphics, which TRA will talk to you about. But right now, the hybrid approach that we're working on brings the panel data together with the machine data across all platforms.
So that's the Nielsen.
Now, this is the ComScore's blueprint. It's called
Oh, the
Project
ComScore,
Blueprint
excuse me.
that Sim is working on with ComScore right now.
Okay.
Yeah, one of the other problems with panels, I grew up, spent a lot of years at Nielsen, and everything Nielsen does pretty much is on a panel. But you always wonder, how different are the people that sign up to have everything that they watch and everything that they do on their mobile phone and everything else? How different are they? So what TRA's belief is we want to go with more census-like information. So it gets double-blind matched, so there's no PII that's shared with anybody, but to be able to know for the same household, what did they buy, when did they buy it, how much did they pay, when were they exposed to TV, when were they exposed to something on mobile, when were they exposed to an online video, and then be able to look at that on the back end to provide sales lift information, that is the holy grail, and being able to understand it. Now, even large samples. For example, we take in about 16 million loyalty card holders, and we're adding another 25 million in the next couple of months. And then we have, more than 6 million set-top box providers, and then we take in either ComScore or Datalogix information for the digital exposure information. But you still come up with, a three-way match with Datalogix is 267,000 homes, which sounds a lot considering Nielsen uses 25,000 to do their currency metric. But even at that, then you have to factor in the penetration of a brand, and then you have to factor in, the digital reach was only 3%, and
the target audience.
And the target audience, and how do I get if TV had a 95% reach, how do I get enough homes to be in a control, or how do I get enough homes to measure the digital that were just exposed to digital? So, but the plus of using census-like data opposed to panel is these are all of you. You may not know it, but if you carry a loyalty card in your house, in your pocket, or in your purse or wallet or whatever, you're in one of these. If you have a satellite dish or an MSO, a cable provider, you're in that sample. And if it's not ours, it's in somebody else's. Now, like I said, everything's privatized, but what's nice is there's no question about, are these like normal people? Because of scale and the census, they are normal people, and that's ultimately what you want.
And this is big data, basically. It's the big data world where you're bringing together all of these, matching data sets. Now, the panels have a role still, because what happens a lot of times in big data is the data is at a household level. And when you get to doing some of this cross-platform measurement, you have to deduplicate at the individual level. So you end up in a situation where you need kind of both household level data and individual level data. So it gets complex.
Absolutely. Monica, do you have some thoughts on that?
You want to add?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think the whole deduplication issue is a profound one across the industries, right? I've worked in digital advertising for a long time, and I think, there's no doubt that it's a very fragmented, marketing industry, right? But I think, in terms of stitching all that data together, that's one of the biggest marketing challenges. But, obviously with, solutions like Adobe Analytics, for example, where it ultimately, offers analytics reporting capabilities in order to, drive insight, for better data-driven decision-making, right?
How does it work? Can you tell us a little bit about Adobe Analytics?
Sure. So essentially, it, provides, marketing insight based on, the objective of typically driving ROI for businesses. So for example, if you're a user and you saw a TV ad and then you went on Facebook, you saw a page post ad, clicked on that, went to the website, and then made a purchase online, basically Adobe Analytics stitches the offline and the online data together so that they can tie action with past user behavior. And from that method, it provides marketers with a more holistic view of the customer in making more well-informed decisions on where to allocate budgets, whether that's more in TV, online, search marketing, etc. as well. And what I'm seeing in digital advertising industry, as we're talking about analytics and big data, is that there's probably going to be more of a convergence between advertising platforms and also marketing platforms where there's a lot of that big data and analytics data. When you look at digital advertising in particular, like a lot of marketers today, as well as agencies as well, they're very used to buying upper funnel metrics like impressions, clicks, engagement, and they will optimize that towards a conversion goal. But what we're seeing is that when you consider that data these days is becoming more sparse in this ecosystem, like many of your clients, where they are very performance orientated, a lot of conversion rates will be so low. Like some of them are like, even in your best performing channels like search, they're like a matter of a few %, right? Yeah. So I think where it's moving is more of a convergence between ad tech and marketing tech, and clients as well as agency having to look at other metrics, richer metrics, like time spent on site, how many page views you've visited, and tying that middle funnel data into the advertising ecosystem as well, so that you can essentially use more data signals and early data signals that actually correlate with what your desired KPIs are to better make those informed decisions, so that which media placements are working the best and which creative content is working the best as well.
And you mentioned something about social. Is Adobe, you got a sweet spot with looking at social? Can you share?
Yeah, I mean, social, when we're talking about content, social networks are ultimately a distribution point for some of these lightweight contents, right? So I think in terms of social advertising today, it's definitely evolving at a fairly rapid pace. If you look at organic reach today, it's probably dropped about 50% in the past, like year to year. We came out with an Adobe Digital Index report.
Why do you think that is?
Facebook.
We're going to talk about that in a minute.
Yeah, predominantly, Facebook. I mean, it was great for a couple of years where marketers experimented and they, got a great free organic reach. But based on the trends that we're seeing, there is going to be sort of growth in the paid advertising arena as well. So based on that, it's definitely going to be more challenging for marketers who are very used to getting free media and reach, trying to figure out how they can derive ROI from social media today, not just from the limited organic reach that they have now, but ROI from a paid advertising perspective as well. And I think part of that, especially as marketers, Facebook and Twitter are sort of moving towards helping marketers prove ROI, is again going back to use of data signals as well. Like Facebook and Twitter, all those networks are sort of evolving their ad solutions and picking up more data signals to sort of build into their algorithms. But I think from a marketer's perspective, again, it's really about, how do I leverage additional data that I own, whether it's first party data, to I guess be able to bid programmatically from a social media perspective to drive ROI.
Right.
I mean, that's where it's headed.
That's so interesting because the data partnerships that are evolving are, things you might not have really anticipated years ago. Marketers want to have their first party data and build out their huge databases and their DMPs. And then you have publishers that are trying to develop their first party data, and people are matching the third party data. It's everyone in the industry wants their database, so that they might not always want to share with everyone, but they have the option of sharing with everyone. And there's a lot of this, as we move into more programmatic and more automated automated buying, the databases are going to start talking to each other. And so, there is a lot of automation, even more so coming to the industry than we've had in the past.
Let's talk a little bit about what that means, like real-time bidding and some of the interconnect between some of those larger databases and how it changes the game.
Well, yeah, I think, what's nice about some of the big data that's out there is it allows you to take learnings from one vehicle and apply it to the other. So if you've got all of this information from the same household or the same panelist, you can take those learnings. So for example, what we do at TRA is take those people who are exposed to your campaigns through television, and then we identify those homes that have certain code numbers. We provide that to Datalogix and say, okay, these are the homes that were exposed to your TV campaign, and then they can use that to help target the digital. But conversely, it can work the same way. If you know who you've been targeting with digital, you can work your way back upstream and help identify what are programs that might either expand your reach or expand your frequency depending on what you're looking for. One of the other things in terms of partners is we also have a partnership with a company called Symphony Advanced Media. And they do a great job of collecting, you can download it onto your app, an app onto your phone. I talk with my hands. I'm not Italian. Still do it. Anyway, you download an app onto your phone and onto your PC, and then they friend you, and you accept their friend, and they collect then all the social data from both the panelists' Facebook and Twitter feeds. And then TiVo owns a company called Digital Smiths, where we can take that information and then we're going to try to mine it to be able to help advertisers understand what's going on across all of the different platforms that are out there, as well as social, to try to bring it all together.
Yeah, it's a great company, by the way. If you haven't been introduced to them, Sim did the first trial with Symphony Advanced Media about a year or so ago. And it's on the app on the smartphone can measure everything that's going on the phone, including social. They have an automatic content recognition technology that picks up all the television signals, so you can figure out everything they're watching on television at the same time. And the panelists download a toolbar for all their computer-related behavior. So you get this incredible 360 view of behavior for one person. And then they can link it through various ways, through TiVo and through surveys and other ways they're working on, to these impact measures. So it's a great company.
I have a question. That's a self-selected, like as a user, I decide that I want to download?
Yeah, it's a panel that you have to opt, that they recruit you to be in a panel. It is a panel, but actually, and that's the drawback of it, it's a small panel, and that's why they're working with TRA and TiVo to get the big data piece. They're linking their panel. They're, again, hybrid measurement. They're linking their panel with the TiVo, TRA data.
And actually, we're taking it one step further. TiVo has a group called Power Watch, and these are heavy-duty TiVo homes that watch, have a TiVo box. So we have all their set-top box information second by second. We know what they're doing. And then what we're doing is recruiting some of those homes that we have about 35 to 40,000 of those homes, and we're recruiting them to join the Symphony panel so that we can expand it. Right now, Symphony has it at 11,000, but let's say we get half, another 20,000. So now we're at 30,000, which again, not that it's the only benchmark out there, but 25,000 determines whether a program wins or loses, and whether some of the content providers are still in business.
Does that gauge whether you're on your phone or not? Does it track
everything?
Okay.
Everything on your
because
phone.
it knows what apps, how often, how long.
Well, that's
time of day.
Wow. So we really feel monitored. I think there are an enormous amount of mobile tech players that are all engaged in tracking your engagement, particularly anything from moment to moment, like gaming companies who are tracking every move you make in each game, to companies like a Banjo, which is a new company that's been out for a while, that literally not only is tracking what you're doing, but is aggregating and finding, sort of interpreting it in terms of the messaging. So it's not only are you doing it or are you not engaged, it's actually looking at what you're writing and interpreting videos and photos and, massively aggregating and in a way where it's able to spot world events that are bubbling up socially. In like the Ukraine or Egypt, they were one of the first services to really identify what people were actually saying and messaging. And so there is going to be a very fast path over the next few years of being able to aggregate and then disseminate all these data points. And the question is, that makes it even harder and better, or more difficult in some ways, to know what to do for your clients, right? You know, there's going to be services out there that really know a lot. And so the question is, how does that inform the creative process still, right? Of knowing who to hit where and when. It's still, you have to come up with the messages for it, but you're going to also learn from the messaging components of these services as well. So it's not just on the data usage, but it's the content of what they're communicating. So it's another level of experience. I just want to return and say that, you know, in the growing era of making content and making it universally available, one of the things on social is it really has created a vortex of free, and it's resonated out. There's free to play apps. People want free. How many people download apps that they've been paying for lately? Right. You're in the minority, certainly in the millennial category, right? And so we do think that the freemium model, which has really taken off on the mobile side, I'm going to speak to that for a second, it's been interesting. And where you're seeing some bridging is that Facebook as an app has really done a couple of key moves. And Monica and I had this conversation about some of their initiatives to actually sort of let their database and all their profiles be available to other content partners who are developing, and so they want to use some of the matching. For example, in I think April, they recreated the Atlas ad server, and feel free to jump on if you want. But the Atlas server is going to allow you to take any names and lists and phone numbers and map that sort of anonymously, but really understand who you're actually targeting to. So it moves away from that aggregative anonymous user to, I actually know that Monica's on or Marsha's on, and so I'll be able to kind of really tune up my database and know who I'm marketing to. So those tools are coming out, whether we like it or not. What do we have any feedback on those early tools yet? Or
the only thing I start my presentations off when I talk to my advertisers is, you got to remember, you're not normal, because a lot of times you'll go into a client and you're like, oh, you know, this is, you know, people, the average home watches 8 hours a day of television. They're like, no way, not in my house. I only watch maybe 2 hours a week. You know, you're not normal. The key is most of us probably have, you know, especially the students, have gone to college. But the fact is that, you know, it's like 30 to 40% of people have actually gone to college. So that's just my little thing, is remind your clients and the people you're talking to that if they don't find it funny, they're not normal.
I think that as far as what I do on the Hollywood film side and brand side, I think it's fabulous, because if Star Wars is out, let's say, right, and we know who's watching the Star Wars content, well, they could be offered certain initiatives that are happening by this, or interact with this, or there's an engagement. So it's like a Twitter thing where you have followers that have similar like minds. I think it's going to open up the branding and the Hollywood content to actually really be so much more of an interaction. And they'll be able to have feedback. Yeah, it's going to be fabulous. Same with the quantification of content across all second screens and the different mobile medias and what have you. It's really good for brands, because they're going to know which areas are working better or not, and which to put more dollars in, etc. So I think what's happening now is going to create content in a manner that we can't even imagine, because as we know, years ago it would have been unthinkable for a Disney or a studio character to have an audience make a little video. Now it's like, oh, well, they're doing little ones of that. No, this is great. So there's such a change happening where
it's astounding, really, to see how the new world will be with the interaction and how the creativity will evolve because of that quantification, because of the understanding of what that quantification is in the different content formats, and it will facilitate new mediums of brand and content engagement, I think, with audience.
Do you feel like there's going to be some new types of advertising that are emerging, like we talked a little bit, Suzanne, about brand engagement or branded experiences. Do you want to share what some of the luxury brands are thinking of?
Oh, sure. I mean, it's interesting because for us, it's like we look at, especially in the beauty space, there's already a segment of people who already self-identify. They already put their hands up and say, I am a fan of your brand. That's the whole beauty blogger category, right?
Right.
So, that's a huge, and we say that like there's only, maybe 20 people, but there's actually like thousands of people. It's a huge, huge segment. And we look at them not just as influencers that we need to sort of be in contact with and in conversation with, but also as kind of a bellwether for, this is, if we launch a product and organically it becomes something that's big for them, that we actually see a lot of the time there is actually like a very clear sales bump after that. So it's, a lot of us is shifting the way that we work from, we're doing one campaign, it launches in January and it goes on for 6 months, to, okay, we have this like teaser that is basically your print buy, but then the campaign is the content. And the content is something that you develop partially through like a content arc that you're going to create, but then also partially derived from a test and learn strategy where as you start teasing it, you're already figuring out, okay, this is going to be better. This is going to perform better with this target audience. This is going to perform better with this target audience. And the campaign becomes more of, it becomes more bifurcated, but it also becomes richer. So I think, again, from our perspective, it's the data that you're talking about in terms of Atlas is super good. Personally, it sketches me out a little bit, but I also recognize that again, I'm not normal. That there's already a bunch of people who are totally willing to give that up because they understand that brands can give them something better in return. Mm-hmm. I mean, if I'm a hair care brand, which will remain nameless, and I want to throw a party for my fans in New York City, the cynical person in me is going to say, well, it's just going to be the same 50 people that go to all the parties in New York City who are beautiful. If I had the opportunity to offer that party to 50 people who I knew were actually fully engaged with the brand and they would get something out of it and we would get something out of it, that'd be great. Mm-hmm. And
that blogger community is an interesting multi-channel distribution scene, right?
Yeah.
And most of those folks don't have the budgets or the connections with sponsors that they require to make their opportunities, their revenue enhanced. A lot of it is that they're relying on Google or YouTube, excuse me, to get their 55%, and with Google taking 45% of their revenue. So in a lot of cases, it's interesting to see how that whole blogger or vlogger ecosystem from MCNs could really benefit from connectivity to sponsors and branded experiences. They do get a lot of product. So that's like a product integration experience and recommendation or review process. But I don't think they get the money up front it's not that easy for them to connect with that brand and then create a sponsored channel.
It's way easier now. There's a lot of firms that will absolutely negotiate those deals on your behalf in the same way as a media partner. I mean, I can think of 7 off the top of my head, and we've worked with a lot of them because it is such especially when you're in that place where you're actually trying to change people's minds about something that was uncool and that it needs to be in the consideration set for being cool. And again, you can't go to them and say, I'm only going to give you this if you tell other people it'll be cool. You have to come humbly
to earn it.
Yeah. The only other thing that I just wanted to throw out there is reviews are a huge data point that actually in many cases make more those are probably more important to a lot of our brands than just straight up engagement interaction, because if you launch a product and all of a sudden, on an Amazon or a Birchbox, you're generating 20,000 reviews. Again, that's a place where we actually see that there's a lot of correlation with sales data. So
I have a question is it okay if we have questions?
This is
it's really more the agency side. there are paid bloggers out there.
Oh, yeah.
And, just like I think it was Yelp that got into trouble because they were only putting the positive ones on top and burying the other ones. Do you think that consumers are going to get, hip to what's going on and trust social less unless it's directly from their friend?
They're already there. They're definitely there. I mean, bloggers who do too many sponsored things, bloggers who are, are just basically pouring it out, for lack of a better word. I mean, there's, like it's a very quick, very drastic turnaround in terms of when people go from, this is somebody that I admire, who is influential to me, to, oh, this person's just doing it for money now. I mean, you have to be careful, right? I mean, it's your brand.
We hear people talking about Facebook as like a marketing channel now. Like it's almost like crossing that point of being a social network, that where it is organic and authentic to just being, I know that when I go there, I'm getting a lot of marketing. And there's a lot of distrust around that, like yesterday, there was a sponsored ad, for example, and 5 of my friends had liked it. And I looked at it and I'm like, I just know those 5 people would never have liked that brand, like that just doesn't make sense to me. So, I think it's a really big challenge. I think we're seeing a lot of changes in the perception of how people feel about advertising and how they react to advertising. And we know that there's a lot of blindness to it. And, it's I think from one of the challenges we're seeing is like the measurement conversation is a lot about still measuring the traditional way of advertising.
Right.
And those two things are kind of 2 different worlds, and they're not yet syncing together. And it's hard because, of course, like you said, that the content is always changing and it needs to. And the idea of creating one big campaign that covers a whole year and does X, Y, Z, and you have it all set up at the beginning of the year is obviously changing as well. So it's kind of getting brands to see that and work with that very dynamic, iterative experience rather than trying to do everything all at once. And you need that level of, you need the ability to change, to learn as you're moving through it and do something that you've never done before, like what do you do with Snapchat, for God's sake? I mean, what are the opportunities there? And, we're seeing, the data is amazing in that it helps you identify, I think, connection points that you may not have considered ever before. For one of our automotive brands that we're social AOR for, we saw that a TV show, which is like one of the most talked about TV shows in social, had a very strong correlation, which you wouldn't even think of it if you knew the TV show and you knew the brand, but the data was able to tell us that. And we were able to do a very interesting kind of unique product placement kind of experience and then tying in digital as well. So that's a very, custom type of solution. And you got to do a lot more of that now than you did before.
Yeah, and I think you're seeing that data, it's not just used, for media optimization, it's used a lot more for creative optimization and for creative ideas. There's so much that you can do that, data is becoming a skill that's actually needed by people on the creative side, as well as what used to be more considered, people more on the quantitative side. So.
Yeah. I also think from you mentioned Facebook before and how people are becoming blind to that. But I think one key thing is that there is also pressure on, marketers and advertisers who invest a lot of money on Facebook, from networks like, Twitter and Facebook to actually develop engaging content as well. Because no matter how much money you throw at, aggressive bids on, showing your ad to a specific audience. If your content's not engaging, you're not going to get visibility. So I think that's sort of a good medium as well in sort of controlling that. But, essentially that's why, there's been a huge focus on page post ads and, a lot of pressure on Facebook on advertisers today, especially because they're paying for it now, to ensure that their content is relevant.
Yeah. Cheryl, were you going to say something?
No.
Okay, good. Okay. All right. I wanted to open it up for questions. Okay. Does anybody want to address anything to the panel?
I'm a content creator. I write for TV and film, and I'm just launching a YouTube show in February. I wanted to know if someone could talk about monetization specifically with YouTube, and someone touched on Facebook. I'm just wondering how that's going to play into the numbers that now people are requesting for.
What's the show about?
It's about coffee. So 90 second coffee video, coffee around town, and there's 16,000 coffee places in LA.
Wow.
So I go from LA to Las Vegas.
Cool. And you're wired, I guess, right? So,
Well, that's a targetable category now.
Yeah.
Coffee drinkers, coffee users, coffee shop
Aficionados.
visitors, coffee aficionados.
all
Yeah.
right, let's solve the problem here.
Are you asking about how do you monetize your show on YouTube?
No, not how. It's just like I kind of want to be aware of, what's available. Where's my goal? My goal would be to get 10 million or 10,000 viewers. And I'm going to launch it on YouTube.
Well, are you trying to monetize it through advertising, or is there a particular, is there a goal to make money out of it, or is there a goal to support something, or?
The goal would be not to support as much as to brand myself because I'm a content creator and I pitch a lot of TV shows.
So you just want to get an audience to show that
So,
you can get an audience.
A ghostwriter, so it just leverages me to get into that realm of like your clients branding themselves. I'm branding myself as a writer for the first time, behind the curtain, and this is who I am.
Yeah, you definitely want to do one of those fashion blogger type things. You want to get everybody to link to. You want to get a lot of earned media.
Yeah, I mean, so subscribers are really, I think views are important, but subscribers are really the nut to crack, because once you have subscribers, then you're viewed as having an addressable audience that you can re-engage multiple times.
Fans.
Yeah, and with YouTube in particular, they, my understanding, having spoken to them from the other side, is that they have incentive programs in place for people who reach certain subscriber. So if you, I forget what the numbers are, but I think it's 500,000 subscribers, or maybe it's up to 1 million.
Right.
They'll let you use their facilities to film things. And then then you can sign up with some of these networks of people who will basically help you broker deals with brands.
Are you with what you call an MCN? Do you know what that is? Okay, so MCMs are the group that are sort of like the farm league of anybody who's originating a concept series to kind of get some coverage. So they're like the first group that can help you get some penetration through social by embedding certain concepts within their whole network of other players. They'll introduce you, and it's
What's it stand for, NCF?
MCN is multi-channel network, which, by the way, is sort of an an LA type of initiative, which is sort of an agency model, but without all the bells and whistles, because it doesn't help you actually do social marketing, and it doesn't actually help you drive advertising or secure sponsors for doing your program. So it's sort of a very slim value set of things, but it is sort of the first thing that I'd recommend that you do. And I think at the end of the day, finding a sponsor for it, whether it's product placement, if you're, aligning with Starbucks, if it's funny enough, sometimes it's scripted, people can get more of a sense of the show itself and be behind it. Whereas if it was sort of an ad hoc, I'm flying in and there's not an agenda, then, you could start to garner some small degree of sponsors. There's a lot of companies out there that will, like Endemol and Maker Studios, that start to ferret people out, but they do also have a nascent program for people that are just starting.
But she's also got a built-in support and fan network in the stores themselves. You have those
Yes.
physical stores. They may have mailing lists, email lists. They may have things they could do for you in the store to generate traffic. What you want to do if you want to build an audience and show you have fans, you want to generate traffic, get people to go and watch this. And they have an interest in getting people to go watch it because it'll bring more traffic to their stores. So I think you could work really well with the people that are featured in your video.
And further down the line, maybe not in February, but you may want to tag your content as well. So people like the ComScores of the world or Datalogics of the world can tell you who are you attracting, from where, give you a lot more metrics that you can, when you go to sell yourself and any of your ideas, these are the types of people that your ideas are attracting.
Okay.
Yeah, I'll just mention something that's kind of related to that, is you think it's kind of obvious that, in the digital world, it's actually easier for kind of file names to be kind of consistent and people to have tagging and to kind of be able to find all the files and everything. I just want to put in a little plug, since we're in Hollywood and it's the creative community, that there's an initiative that SIM is working on to do this more in television, where the Entertainment ID Registry is something that the studios have started to actually register content across any platform. But the problem really now is in linear television that the content owners have to start kind of using a common metadata standard for labeling, calling the files the same thing, so everybody can find them across the ecosystem the same way. And there's a similar initiative in advertising from the ANA and the 4As, the Association of National Advertisers and the agencies, called Ad ID, which is a metadata standard for labeling and calling ads. So it seems like really basic. And in digital, we don't have quite the same problem yet that we have in television, and that the files just aren't called the same thing throughout the whole industry. And so there is an initiative that SIM's working on with the Society of Motion Picture and Television Engineers to get this metadata actually embedded into the content. So it'll flow into digital, the same metadata at some point. But digital has file names right now, so it makes it a little bit of an easier problem.
Anybody else?
Excuse me. Hi. My name is Lucas. I have a company that deals with B2B platform for unobtrusive video advertising, basically. And we didn't build it for fashion, but a lot of our early customers are from the intersection of fashion and technology. So I'm ramping up quickly. First of all, just a general comment. I think that Digital Hollywood did you guys a slight disservice, because I came to this panel to learn about cross-platform monetization. It has nothing to do with your gender. It was
right.
He's trying to get in touch with his feminine side.
I have a teenage daughter. I'm plenty in touch with my company. I have a question mainly for you two. I'm curious as to when you're dealing with established brands, how do you migrate the passage from traditional media, and getting metrics on traditional media, which they're very used to the digital space. I mean, Chanel just launched an Instagram channel and has 2 million followers in 24 hours, right? And they still don't know how to tag things. I mean, where are there any good tools to manage sort of the intersection of metrics from print and from just the traditional buying world with what's going on in digital and cross-platform attribution?
You might have that.
Great question.
Honestly, the way that we have done it is a little bit Machiavellian, I guess. When I first started, I was looking for clients who were willing to take risks and who were pretty entrepreneurial. And basically what I told them was, I have 2 people basically who I know that I can go to with innovative programs. And what I've said is, look, I'll try to negotiate the best deals that I can for you for a limited time. So, X vendor comes to us and says, this is the price of my service. I basically say, you need to give it to me for 50 or 25% of what you're charging for 3 months. And in exchange, I'll make sure that my client is okay with giving you some data that you can use for case studies. We know that it's a short-term prototype sort of test and learn kind of thing. If the product works, the client is usually totally happy to invest the full amount in actually continuing to use the service. But it gives them a way to take what are pretty big and well-regarded brands with substantial, awareness, reach, distribution behind them, and safely use the money that they have kind of in their petty cash budget, things which their bosses don't really pay attention to be able to try things out. And then, so for one of the clients that I've worked with, it's that approach has actually worked incredibly well. It also then gives us as an agency data on what works and what doesn't. So then I can turn around to my other clients who are more conservative and say, here's how this works. I can show you this behind the scenes, but this is what we were able to do with it, because again, some of it is the tool and some of it is the creative. So it's as much on us in terms of whether or not it works or doesn't. But that's been a good way for us to get them to take money out of traditional media, especially things like flash banners, which I still don't understand why people buy. But like that's often where the money is waiting to be moved from. So even if it's something as simple as like, $50,000, $75,000, $100,000, things that are a drop in the bucket when you're looking at a multi-million-dollar flash buy. Using that sort of process, I've been able to get them to commit, okay, if this is what it looks like on a microcosm, then I feel comfortable going to my boss and saying, I'm going to take $350,000 out of this and put it into that because I know it's going to perform better based on our brand, our team, and our whatever level of execution we happen to be at with regard to retailers. Because ultimately for them, it's more, all of the other data points for them are kind of indicators and bellwethers, but the only thing that matters at the end of the day is sales and share of market. Do I outcompete everybody else when it's on a shelf? And are my retailers more willing to give me interesting things? Do they think that my brand is a brand that has potential and is on the rise?
So unfortunately, I would like to address that question, and I think you did a great job in giving us an idea of how to do that, because we're out of time, believe it or not. So I want to just share with you that it was funny because when I keyed up this presentation, we had a lot of keywords: women in advertising, which is what this panel mostly is, and innovation, which is sort of generic. So we could just set that aside for a second. And cross-platform strategies, the business of monetization. I think it wraps closely back to the thesis that advertising is going to be a key driver, cross-platform, for everyone in the back end that makes it more integrated across all those platforms and that we can get more data to it. I think that's what this group is going to be dealing with, and that's what every content creator and distributors and publisher and advertiser are going to have to look at. So I think, I think advertising is not only here to stay, but it's going to get more and more interesting as it balances the creative and the cash that lines your pocket to do the products, to sell your products and to make it happen. So thanks for coming. We appreciate it. And it was a terrific panel, and I will do it again. So.